Good morning, everyone. Hey, welcome to our webinar series here this morning. We really appreciate everybody showing up. We've got lots of attendees on here this morning. This is our third in a series of webinars that we've been doing. We had Jeff Sherman out here a month or so ago with bringing you kind of that market information. We had Mike McClellan bringing you some weather information a number of weeks ago, and then we thought, well, let's go a little deeper here and let's let's go a little deeper here and let's talk about how do we get talk about Brazil and other things that are going on inside of our business and things that really affect our marketplace here. Just getting my screen ready here for us this morning, so bear with me for a sec. Technology always makes me stumble when I'm in when it really matters here. So should be able to see my screen. So once again, welcome and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Don Cabas. I'm the General Manager of Great Lakes Grain. And I just talked a little bit about some of the things that we've got going on here at Great Lakes Grain. As you'll notice, we've got a number of different logos on our website here. We have Agris, we have FS Partners, and we have Embrin Co-op. So Great Lakes Grain is a partnership between Agris, FS Partners, and Embrin now. Embrin up in Eastern Ontario up to Ottawa. So we go from Windsor to Ottawa and kind of all places in between in Southwestern Ontario. So to our French-speaking participants, bonjour. That's as far as I will attempt my French. So once again, thanks everyone for joining this morning. If you ever want to get a hold of me, there is my phone number and my email address. By all means, anytime you want to chat about the grain business or our business or anything else in between, certainly feel free to do that. I thought I would touch a little bit this morning on some of the things that we've got going on. I think first off, I really want to thank our sponsors, DeKalb and Bear, for sponsoring this event. Both DeKalb and Bear have been great partners to Great Lakes Grain over the years. They sponsor our crop assessment tour that we run every summer. So DeKalb and Bear have been very good supporters of Great Lakes Grain and the co-op system across the board. I would just touch a little bit on some of the activities that we've got going on inside of Great Lakes Grain, FS Partners, Agris, and Embrin. So we got a big project going on at Air. We're adding about 700,000 bushels of space. We're also putting a new intake leg in there. We did have a little bit of a setback last fall. We lost we were putting up a 400,000 bushel bin, and apparently when you put up large bins and the wind catches them, they don't stand much of a chance. So it ended up we've had to rebuild it. So that's coming back. We'll have Air back up and running here. Well, it's running today, but we'll have our new expansion all set to go by the time wheat harvest is on us. So we've got lots of new room at Air and able to handle lots of grain in that location. Put a new overhead in, and we're working on a new intake pit. So those projects are underway. In our Chatham location for Agris, we've added 3 new 125,000 bushel bins. So we've added over 400,000 bushel of space. Lots of this picture was just done a couple of days ago. Lots of activity going on. We've got the whole place kind of tore apart, but it will be up and ready for wheat harvest as well. So we've got a good bit of expansion going on in our Chatham location. This is just the engineering drawing. So you can see we're adding the 3 tanks, and we're actually adding additional intake capacity at Chatham. So adding more speed and space is our definition. We do have a project that we hope to get started this summer in Grand Valley, adding some intake and drying speed and some storage. Been underserviced in that market for the last number of years, so we're pretty excited to get shovels in the ground. We're waiting on some permitting up in that area, and that is coming here shortly. A couple projects that we did finish in this past year. We did add some more space at Glencoe. We added another 100,000 bushel bin that just given us a little bit more space in the countryside in Glencoe. We also added a 140,000 bushel bin at Brigden. So these were both Agris locations. We tore down some 1960s vintage grain storage and added that large bin at the end, that shiny one. So that's going to enhance our ability to handle some product in Brigden this next fall. As we get ready for our next speaker, so a couple things. If you guys have any questions at all, please use the chat function on our on the webinar here, or you can text them to Rachel, 519-818-0737. She will do that. We're going to try to make this a little bit interactive too as we move ahead. We're going to do a couple of polls through our presentation, and so I think Jackie, as we kind of queue up between Heather and myself, we can probably get a poll going. I'll introduce Heather, and then we can start the next poll. So our next speaker is Heather Miller. Heather is our grain originator in the Lambton, Middlesex, Elgin counties. Heather's been with us for a number of years here now, and really enjoying her time with us. So Heather's going to talk a little bit about our digital strategy. How do we help you, the farmer, see your grain records online and those kind of things. So I'll pass the screen over to Heather.
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everyone. As Don mentioned, I'm Heather Miller. I'm the grain originator. I work in Lambton, Middlesex, and Elgin counties. And it's my pleasure this morning to just give a quick overview of Frontier. Don mentioned we're doing a lot of investment in our facilities right now, but we're also looking at other things too that can help you, the producer, to manage your businesses better. We want to make things easy for you to deal with us. And the Frontier program, it's essentially a program where you, the producer, can look at your grain records. And easiest way, we'll talk a little bit about how to get signed up, or if you're signed up, some of the functionalities. And if you go onto our website, greatlakesgrain.com, and you find the banner, you'll find products and services. And then you notice there's a lot of different things. I encourage you to take a look at our website because there is a lot of very valuable information there, but we'll focus on Frontier here today. You click on the Frontier button. If you are already registered for Frontier, you can log into your account from this screen. And actually, if you're not a Frontier, don't have a Frontier account yet, you can register right online through our website. One little note, there is a spot for your account number on the bottom. It's not a required field. I'm sure most of you don't know your account numbers, but you can fill this information and then we will send you back a link. And remember, this is personalized to you, so it is a login and password protected. Once you do sign into Frontier, you can see it'll say welcome. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, there's different things: contracts, tickets, payments. Our standard procedures when it comes to contracts is if we have an email address on file for you, we will email your contract once an offer or a sale has been made. We will not stop doing this. If you're not on email, we mail out those copies to you. With the Frontier program, you can actually go into the system and you can confirm those contracts. We would really like growers to acknowledge their contracts and sign them and get them back to us. But with the Frontier program, you can actually confirm them online. And you'll see there's a confirm button on the side. What happens when you go into there is you'll see your contract pop up. You can go over to the confirm function. There's a short summary of your contract with us. And this you can verify with the email copy that we sent over to you. If everything balances in terms of the quantity you were looking for, the time period, and of course the price, you just click the confirm button and you're good to go. You don't need to sign it and send it back to us. I think this is a fantastic feature myself. The other one that I look at too is settlements. We have a very large percentage of growers that are doing direct deposit. We do email out the backup to you in most cases, but the odd time something might get misplaced. And I think about a grower at 8 o'clock at night working on books and all of a sudden realizes Great Lakes Grain made a deposit into my account, but I can't find the backup. You can always wait until the next morning and give the branch a call, but if you want to keep rolling, you can go into Frontier Program. You can actually go into the Settlement tab, and you can see all the settlements and payments that we've made to you. Once you look there, you can actually open it up. You can go into Settlement PDF, and you can pull up an exact copy of what details your bushels, your payment, all of your details there. So you can print it off and continue on with your books. I don't have any specific slides about tickets, but the one comment I will make too is you can look up your tickets online. If you are delivering to the elevator, they are instantaneous. When we're doing third-party movement to end users or to terminals, places like that, picking grain up off farm, we do have to receive the information from that destination first before we can put it into the system. But if you're in the tractor, or sorry, if you're in the combine and someone else is delivering to the elevator and you want to take a quick look and see what your moisture was on that load of corn you sent in, you can pull up Frontier on your phone, you can take a look at it, see what your moisture was before the tractor's even back to the field. So those are a few things with the Frontier program. I encourage you to get set up on the program. If you need any help with it, any one of us is more than willing to help step you through it, give you a few little tips and tricks that we have. That's all for my portion. It's my pleasure to introduce Nolan Collard as well as Owen Roberts, and they're going to give us an overview on the Ontario situation before we listen to Marcus talk about South America.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. I'm Nolan Collard. I'm your grain originator out of the Delhi location, and I'm here to give you an Ontario corn outlook. So the spring 2021 export market is a little bit opposite from what happened in 2020. Last year, we saw a lucrative program come out that were fulfilled with premiums and the need for grain. This year, not so much. A lot of the grain is bought, and the movement doesn't seem to be as required. Keep in mind that the freight in the Great Lakes did increase over the winter here, so it has become a little bit more difficult. With that being said, there is some U.S. corn that's coming into Ontario over the last 6 months, predominantly into Suncor, but as well as Elmer and London and even Port Colborne there. So, which is well, good and bad here. So the ethanol demand is expected this summer. People are going to go places. That is almost a guarantee this summer, one way, shape, or form. With that being said, we're going to have to find a way to cover themselves off for July, August, September, which they're not exactly bought for. This spring, they seem to be pretty covered by, which is good news. But it does make it difficult with the inverted futures market for marketing decisions this summer. People don't know really where to stand, whether the grain farmer, the grain merchant, or even the grain company and the end user. So where do they draw that line in the sand, and where do they stand on it? As well, will we have enough corn to get to harvest 2021? Who has 20% left, who has 5% left, who is totally sold out? It's a very good question, and it's going to be interesting to see if everybody can get themselves covered off to make it. We have noticed that corn seed sales in Ontario are slightly up, which is a positive sign for Ontario as a province. As well, the average new crop corn price this year to the elevator so far is $5.38 versus the 5-year average of $4.91, excuse me. That is almost 50 cents a bushel into your pocket. Today, the cash price is about $5.50, which means you can make an above average historical sale. The Canadian dollar a year ago was about 71 cents on March 31st, 2020. And today we're sitting right around the 79.4 mark, which is crazy to see, and obviously has affected basis levels over the past year, which is something to keep in mind. And I'm going to introduce Owen Roberts to give us a outlook for soys and wheat.
Thank you, Nolan. I'm Owen Roberts. I work at the AIR FS Partners branch since 2016, working for farmers. And we're going to talk a little bit about soybeans here. The 2020 crop was a good crop for soybeans. And last year on the St. Lawrence Seaway, we saw a record year for exports on grains down the Seaway. So most of the beans, I think, that are going to be exported are out of the province. Current basis values being offered by crush plants are better than what exporters can pay up for further export programs. So if you've got old crop beans still unsold, I'm not sure why, but you want to make sure you get some sales into the remaining purchases that crush plants are going to do over the summer. New crop bean basis values are very strong, and cash values today for elevator are just below the $15 mark. I checked before the call here, and Air's elevator value was $14.74, and 22 crop is $13.43. So you want to look at that value, make sure that you're positioned ahead of this report. Perhaps there'll be some surprises that are to the downside. As Nolan said, the Canadian dollar has marched higher hand in hand with crude oil, and that's been hurting basis values being offered. The other factors to higher oil is increased transportation costs for export markets. So there still is in my mind, acreage battle in Ontario between corn and beans. I come from an area where the ground is a little lighter, and a lot of farmers in answering the survey saying warmer and drier are in my territory are probably thinking that beans are the better bet. So don't count beans out. If you're thinking that, you might want to get more sales on than less, because there will be a crush in harvest to move those beans. The average new crop price to the elevator that we have marketed with our customers is $13.97 versus $12.15 as the 5-year average. So why wouldn't you price some beans $2 above your 5-year average? At just below 15 at $14.74 this morning, you're well ahead of the pack and past history. Other factors that could influence the dollar is possibly a federal election, either in the spring or in the fall after the budget is tabled. That could be a bit of a surprise, so keep that in mind as well. Going on to wheat, we had a really nice open fall, early harvest on beans, and that supported a really high acreage planted in Ontario. Estimates for acreage are all over the place, but I think we're north of 1 million acres, maybe even as high as 1.15 million acres. That is going to create a big crush of wheat coming into harvest this July. If you run the pencil on what domestically we need in Ontario, that will look like possibly four or five bushels out of every 6 needing to be exported. So have your movement plan in place for unmarketed bushels at this point. It looks like it's greening up and is well tillered. There's virtually no carry to hold wheat. And you can also look at 22 values. They're not too far behind, about a dime behind. There are good values, as I said, on wheat. As I said, transportation rates are going up as well. Insurance rates on marine transport are moving up higher with the recent blocking of the Suez Canal. That will be kind of an example for higher rates, I think, with all marine insurers. And again, average sold for wheat for our customers into our elevator system is $7.20 currently, versus the 5-year average of $6.13. You can market new crop wheat just below $7 still. So why wouldn't you make some sales if you have a good stand of wheat coming, nearly $1 over the 5-year average? Thank you very much for your patience and listening And I'm going to pass this back to Devin.
Thank you very much, Owen. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I'd like to introduce Marcos Rubin. He's our guest speaker today. He's a partner at Agroconsult and manages the strategy and solution business. He is responsible for the intelligence projects and studies for the sectors of fertilizer, agrochemical, machinery, logistics for commodities, and other related to agribusiness. During his career, he was responsible for developing market intelligence for clients. Altogether, between rural producers and companies, Marcos has presented more than 250 lectures with focus on agribusiness structural and conjunctural themes. Marcos has also coordinated more than 12 crop tours and has extensive knowledge in the rural reality in Brazil. Besides representing Agroconsult in the main international agribusiness events, I had the pleasure of meeting Marcos actually during the Pro Farmer Crop Tour in 2012. We were set up on a team on day 3 of the tour and did yield assessments in Illinois and Iowa. After talking to Marcos and hearing firsthand about Brazilian agriculture, I always felt it would be very valuable to bring his knowledge back to our customers. I would like to welcome Marcos Rubin. This meeting has been sponsored by Bayer Crop Science and DeKalb Canada. Marcos, if you're ready, you can take it away.
Hi, Devin. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Great Lakes Grain, Devin and Don. And as Devin said, I had the opportunity to meet Devin at a crop tour in the United States almost 10 years ago. It was great to share some thoughts. And for me, it's a big opportunity here to talk for the first time for Canadian farmers about the Brazilian agribusiness. So let me share my screen here and we can move forward. Well, I guess you guys can see my screen, right? So, well, thanks again. And I have a big challenge here, which is in about 40 minutes to 1 hour to talk about Brazilian agribusiness, which is huge and complex. So I will try to summarize some very complex environments, some very different conditions for agricultural producer. And but I think we will have a great discussion here. I have a mix of information. So I thought about how I would like to learn about Canadian agriculture, and I brought here a mix of some geography about Brazilian agricultural production. So we will talk a little bit about where is the production located, what are the differences among regions, and what is the farmer profile for each region in Brazil. And of course, I simplified some things here which are not so simple in reality. We're going to talk a little bit about the crop conditions. Of course, everyone is interested in crop conditions. How is the soybean crop in Brazil? How is the corn crop in Brazil? Especially the corn crop, which is being planted and is under development right now. And I will talk a little bit too about infrastructure in Brazil, exchange rate in Brazil, profit margins in Brazil. And I think at least at the past experiences I had talking to North American farmers, the Canadian, it's really the first time. They were amazed about how competitive Brazil is related to United States nowadays. So they never thought that Brazilian competitiveness in terms of soybeans and corn was so huge. So that's something I think it's very interesting to share some thoughts with you guys. So the first geography lesson here, it's a more general view about Brazil. This is our country. On the left side, we have the main environmental biomes. So we have the Amazon biome here in green, and we have the savanna biome, which is the orange one. And we have what we call Mata Atlantica. It's a more temperate environment on the green, okay? And if we think about Brazil, Amazon, Canada, it's 1.8 times the size of the Amazon region. So Canada, it's a huge country. The Amazon, it's also huge. And Canada is slightly bigger than Brazil when we think about the size of the country. On the right side, what we have is on green, it's our natural vegetation nowadays. So green spots are spots that are still nature as it was like 1,000 years ago. And the yellow dots, the yellow color represents land and vegetation that it was already transformed either in agriculture, in pasture, but also our cities, roads, and everything. So in yellow, it's everything that it's not native nature in Brazil. So we see that the Amazon region, it's pretty much conservated. But when we read the news, we tend to believe that the Amazon is being destroyed. Of course, we have problems. We can't deny the problems. We need to face the problems and put a stop on it. But we are far, far away from having the Amazon region devastated. Okay, so that's one important information that I think it's a little bit confused when we read the general news on the market. Okay, so just moving forward, when we think about soybeans and corn production in Brazil, that's the general view. So on the left map, we have some state border divisions. Okay, so this is the Mato Grosso state. Adding soybeans and corn, it's a 71 million metric tons producing state. It's by far our largest producer. So it's huge. It's huge. It's like a country by itself when we think about soybeans and corn. And it has like a 4 million people population and a huge corn and soybean production. We also have the Paraná state in the south region of Brazil, 35 million metric tons of soybeans and corn. Then we have Goiás state in the Middle East of Brazil. We have another very important state in the south of Brazil, which is Rio Grande do Sul. So when we think about soybeans and corn in Brazil, it's very well distributed in the southern region of Brazil and in the middle of Brazil, okay? We almost do not have soybean production in the Amazon state. We have a little bit on the Pará state. It's very small production. So it's well distributed along the country, along the countryside. On the right side, we have the border lines for the counties, for the main counties in Brazil. Actually, it's a micro region. It's a sum of 3 to 4 counties. And we have an idea where are the main producing regions in Brazil. So we have here in the northern portion of Mato Grosso state, some very important region for producing soybeans and corn. We have at the Goiás state, another important region, the city of Rio Verde and Jataí. We have the southern portion of Mato Grosso do Sul state, which is this state. So, and our production, it stays on the middle of the country. We do not go so much east when we think about soybean and corn production, at least the large part of corn production. We have some corn production on the east part of the country, but it's more like a subsistence corn production. It's not a commercial corn production. So I think that's very interesting to have a geographical idea about where soybeans and corn is produced in Brazil. Okay, If we add soybeans and corn, we are talking about a crop size of roughly 237 million metric tons of soybeans and corn in 2021. Okay, so that's the number. Well, that's a hard one because what I'm trying to show at this slide is how environment and how the climate works in Brazil. So we have very different regions in terms of rainy season, temperatures, winter severity. So our winter, it's not even a winter for a Canadian standard. So as we get close to 0 degrees Celsius, it's already too cold for us. So when we go to the southern region of Brazil, this R1, region 1, that's where we have this very strong winter for Brazilian standards with 0 degrees Celsius, at the most cold we get, not much more than that. So it's a region that usually has soybeans and wheat as a double crop, okay? It has a humid winter, and it's a region that it has constantly droughts during the summer and the spring. So it's a region that it is more similar to Argentina, okay? So if we get crop seasons in this region, we would have like 1 or 2 bad seasons for every 5 seasons. So droughts are more frequent on the R1 region in the southern part of Brazil. On the region R4, it's the region in where the second crop, usually it's not wheat, usually it's corn. It's not done in a high percentage of the soybean crop. There is not much coverage in terms of second crop because the second crop has a high risk on the R4 region. Usually it's a region in which it starts to rain later on the season and the rains stops earlier in the season. So the window for a second crop, it's very narrow, and usually it's very dry on the winter. The winter, it's very dry. It's not cold, but it's very dry. So that's why the second crop, it's very risky on the R4 region, okay? But even then, there is some second crop. And of course, I'm trying to simplify here. We have microclimates here that benefit the second crop in some very specific spots on this R4 region. Then we have the most important region in Brazil in terms of corn and soybeans. It's the R3 region. Usually it's the region that the rain begins earlier and stops later. So it gives a better window for second crop, for planting a second crop. Rains are more stable. And then you have a more stable soybean crop, and then you have a higher coverage of corn and cotton as a second crop. So it is very influenced by the rains that come from the Amazon region. When we think about the R1 region, the rains comes from the south. When we think about the R3 region, the rains come from the Amazon region. So it's a very important region in Brazil. And then we have like a middle region here, the R2 region. It's not too cold, it's not too dry. It has some droughts once in a while, so it's kind of a middle term between the R1 and the R3 region. Okay, it has second crop too, so it's right in the middle between the R3 and R1. On the winter time, R3 and R4 regions are very dry. Okay, it's very, very dry, so there is no rain. So if you miss the window for planting the second crop, you might have some trouble ahead because you will have no rain for pollinating the crop. So that's the main risk and the main issue so far. Here is some extra information on soybeans and corn in Brazil. And when I was listening to Great Lakes presentation. And one of the things that I heard, it was the battle for acreage, okay, which is very common for Canada and very common for the United States. And in Brazil, we do not have battle for acreage anymore. Okay, we still have corn battling for acreage with soybeans in a very small percentage of the planted area. And what we have, in fact, is for every soybean acre planted, nowadays we have 34% of that acre planted with the corn as a second crop. That in general for Brazil, it used to be like 25% 10 years ago, now it's 40%. If we look only at the regions that produce a second crop, we can say that 55% of the land is covered with a corn crop. And we still have the cotton second crop, which gives a higher coverage percentage if we add the cotton as a second crop. And the thing here is the trend. So we started 10 years ago with 35%, and now we have like 55% on average on regions where second crop are feasible. We have some regions that have more than 70% of the crop of the land being planted with the second crop. So, and what really changed in this last 10 years is that farmers are planting faster, varieties are getting shorter in terms of cycles, development cycles, and their harvesting is getting quicker. So you become able to plant the corn as a second crop more with less risk. Okay, so if we think from 10 years ago to now, I think we have a 30 days shorter crop in terms of soybeans, and that gives the window for planting more corn with less risk in Brazil. Okay, so that's a clear trend. So farmers will always look for planting faster, having shorter cycle varieties of soybeans, and harvesting even faster. Okay, so they have a window for corn and cotton as second crops in Brazil. And here it's a very general view about what is the farmer profile in Brazil. So if we think about agriculture in Brazil, soybeans and corn, it all began in the south of Brazil with the immigrants 100 years ago, 80 years ago, Italians, Germans, Polish, that came to the southern region of Brazil to plant corn at first, and then soybeans later on the 70s. Okay, so at this region, the southern of Brazil, usually it's all relative. Okay, when we think about farmer size, it's very relative. Okay, if we think about India, it's one reality. If we think about Ukraine, it's another reality. Canada might have its own reality too, of course. But when we think about Brazil, properties average size are between 25 and 500. That's acres. Okay, so that's the average size at the southern region of Brazil. So if you have a farmer, and there is some farmers with like 2,000 acres, this is a huge farmer, okay, in the southern portion of Brazil. Then after some years, these farmers, they started to migrate to the center of Brazil, okay, to plant soybeans and corn. So they first came to this light green area. Okay, this light green area has what we call medium farmers. Usually properties average between 500 and 10,000 acres. So it's a lot larger than in the southern region. And there is a couple farmers with like 30,000 acres that are huge farmers. So if you think about a farmer with 30,000 acres, this guy is huge on this green light area in Brazil. And then there is the Mato Grosso state, Maranhão, Piauí, Bahia, which are the dark green states here, the dark green region, which concentrates a lot of big farmers. And I'm not sure how to name them. Some call big farmers, some call large farmers, some call corporate farmers, some call enterprise farmers. But these guys have structures just like a multinational. They have like directors, managers, coordinators, and 2,000 employees, 3,000 employees. It's just a massive, really, really massive. Okay, so if we think a 2,000 acres farm in this dark green region, this guy is a small farmer at this region. So it's a huge farmer in the south, it's a small farmer in the green region. Okay, so largest farmers plant around 1 million acres. Okay, just with the first crop, they still add the second crop to that 1 million acres. So I'm thinking about land here. I'm not thinking about a first crop plus double crop. Okay, and most of the large farmers, they have one thing in common in Brazil. They are all cotton producers. Okay, so if we think about the biggest operations in Brazil, they have soybeans, corn, and cotton. And cotton is the main product. Okay, they like to say that they are not soybean and corn producers. They are cotton producers that also plant soybeans and corn. So it's a different mentality, and cotton adds a lot of value to land compared to soybeans and corn. It has a lot more complexity. It needs a lot more of cash flow. So it's a different game when we think about these large farmers, okay? And when we think about this dark green region with the large farmers, I would say that around 25–30% of the production in this region, it's in the hands of 20–30 farmers. So these guys are getting bigger and bigger. So, and that's a reality which is very different from the southern of Brazil. In the south of Brazil, there is small farmers. They make their profit. They live well, but they are not even close to the large farmers in Brazil. So it's in a general sense, that's how it works here. Okay, I think we have a general understanding here about where soybean and corn is produced in Brazil, and how is the farmer profile in terms of size, and how important is the second crop. We do not have battle for acreage in Brazil anymore, just in a small portion of the summer crop. And now I will enter here to some crop numbers, okay, and some historical numbers about soybean production in Brazil. So to give you a more historical perspective and a current perspective of the crop. So on the left side, we have a chart with the growth of the planted area of soybeans in Brazil in million acres. Okay, so 20 years ago, we had like 34 million acres of soybeans. Within 5 years, we've grown 24 million acres, 11% per year. So it's more than 10% every year of growth, okay? Then from 2005 to 2010, we had a crisis in Brazil. So we had low international prices of soybeans. We had to deal with the beginning of the soybean rust in Brazil. Farmers had expended a lot in the previous cycles, so they had high debts with low prices, with soybean rust problems. And we also had the problem that you guys are facing now with the Canadian dollar. So at that time, we had appreciation of our exchange rate. We've made nominal prices of soybeans in Brazil very low for farmers. So it was a huge crisis. I think it was the largest crisis cycle we had in Brazil when we think about soybeans and corn was between 2005 and 2010. Then from 2010 to 2015, we grew around 6% per year, 21 million acres. Then from 2015 to 2020, we grew 3% per year, 12 million acres. Okay, so it's a very robust growth, and the important message here is that our growth rate is declining. Of course, we are having less and less land available, less and less cheap land available for expansion. So it becomes harder to expand, to grow at the same rate, at the same pace. Okay, so when we think about the 2021 season, actually the crop that we will plant on the second semester, starting on September, we are expecting a 4% growth. Okay, that's 4%. We will see later that profit margins are at record levels. So when we think about Brazil, the first that we think is that, okay, with the record levels, with profit at record levels, shouldn't Brazil be expanding planted area by 5, 6, 10% per year? Well, it's not the case anymore. So we do not have the capacity anymore to add 10% or 8% per year in terms of planted area, even with record profit margins. So our number is 4% for next year in terms of planted acreage. On the right side, we have an evolution of yields. So we came from 36 bushels per acre in 2000 to 52 bushels per acre in 2021. That's what we expect. In 2020, 51 bushels per acre. And what I have to say around yields in Brazil is that Brazilian farmers, they use the highest technology, the best fertilizer, the best crop defense system and management. They are high technology farmers, okay? And here in Brazil, we run the crop tour. So we have a crop tour which is called Rally da Safra. And when we travel in the crop tour to the countryside and we talk to farmers, and it's very clear to us that we have farmers performing 70 bushels per acre, 75, 80 bushels per acre on average on the farm. And that shows us that we still have a lot to grow in terms of national average. So we already have farmers with 20% above average yields in Brazil. So which means that if someone is doing that, if someone is applying technology to harvest like 80 bushels per acre on average on soybeans, the other farmers will catch that number. Okay, so we still have a lot to evolve in terms of yields in Brazil. So those are the historical numbers. Talking a little bit about this crop season. So I think you guys might have read on the news a lot of harvesting problems. So we didn't have the perfect season. Okay, we didn't have, our planting was not perfect. The development of the crop, it was fair enough. And we had, of course, some problems with the harvesting. The thing is, sometimes a producer has a problem with the harvesting and he's affected by moisture or by contaminants in the soybeans. But in the end of the day, that soybeans will be planted and the crop number does not go down as much as it goes for the producer, for the farmer. So this is a view of crop conditions in Brazil from 2 weeks ago. We are just about to release our crop tour results. Next week, we're going to release our crop tour results. So in general terms, we had in the northern part of Brazil, a worse condition than last year. And I would say that on this dotted blue line, blue circle here, we have improved conditions in the last weeks. So we might have this region maybe performing equal or better than last year, at least some of these regions, some of these spots. But the main difference about last year crop and this year crop is the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul. Last year, they had a severe drought. They have a terrible drought. So last year, Brazil harvested 51 bushels per acre with a terrible drought on the south. And this year, the southern part of Brazil will harvest probably a record crop. Okay, so we are talking about a 17 bushel per acre difference in a state that is very important for soybeans. So in the end of the day, we could be a slightly worse in the Mato Grosso state, but we're going to be so much better in the southern part of Brazil that will compensate and balance the crop numbers. So we think the crop size in terms of yields, the yield number this year in Brazil, it's very similar to last year. Okay, a little bit above. We're going to release new numbers next week, and but in general terms, we do not have a crop with problems in Brazil in general terms for soybeans. Okay. So this brings our crop number to 134 million metric tons this year. Okay, that's the number we released 15 days ago. Like I said, we're going to update it next week. Last year, we had 126 million metric tons. And I would say that our potential nowadays in Brazil with a regular crop in terms of yields, it's very close to 140. Maybe above 140 million metric tons. So that's 134, the number we have for the soybean crop in Brazil. That's 52 bushels per acre. Like we saw before in previous slides, we have a 95 million metric tons, 95 million acres planted area this year, okay? So if we think in recent historical data, we are talking about 7 million metric tons per year of increase in production in Brazil in the last 6 years here, what we have in the chart. So that's very impressive. And of course, that's given to planted area growth and yield growth in the last years, okay? So I tried to bring numbers here in bushels. We are not used to work with numbers in bushels. That's roughly 492 billion bushels when we think about the 134 million metric tons. That's the conversion of the numbers, okay? So when we think about exports, Brazil will probably export something around 84 million metric tons in 2021. Okay, so that's a 134 crop size, 84 million metric tons of exports. And if we look back 10 years ago, we were exporting something around 30 million metric tons. So that's a very impressive growth. Of course, it's a growth that is possible because our production is growing at a similar pace. And our domestic crushing for our protein industry and oil industry has grown too, but at slower pace than the export market. So last year we had like 91 million metric tons. We reduced stocks in Brazil to almost nothing, to virtually nothing when we think about soybeans and corn. So last year we still had we still benefited from the trade war between the United States and China. So China came to Brazil and took all the soybeans they could. So we had almost nothing in terms of soybeans stocks in 2020. And I don't think we will have much in 2021. Okay, so we will have certainly very, very, very low stocks levels in Brazil. Okay. When we think about Argentina, so just to give a different view here, or a similar view about Argentina. When we think about Argentina, Argentina planted area of soybeans has also grown in the last 10 years. Okay, it came from 21 million acres to 44 million acres. It has decreased in the last 5 years. Between 2015 and 2020, it has decreased because when the Macri government entered in Argentina, they reduced the export tax for corn, and somehow they benefited corn planted area in Argentina. So corn grew in terms of planted area, and we had a reduction in soybeans planted area in Argentina in the last 5 years. Okay, so that's the reason we have a reduction of soybeans planted area. We cannot say that yields in Argentina are growing. Okay, they are pretty much stable. They are very volatile because Argentina suffers a lot with droughts. Every 1 or 2 crops out of 5, they have problems with droughts. This year, they have problem with drought, especially for the what they call the second crop soybeans. The second crop soybeans in Argentina, it's the soybean which is planted after the wheat harvest. So it's the later soybeans, and which is suffering a lot in some regions in Argentina. Okay, so in terms of yields, in the last 10 years, they have gone like sideways in Argentina. And when we think about production in Argentina, we are talking about a sideways trend. Okay, if we look in the last 10 years, okay, production came from 61 million metric tons to 35 million metric tons in a really severe year in terms of weather. But in general terms, we are talking about a crop size that has suffered to move above 50 million metric tons on average. Okay, so it goes a little above 50, 55, and then comes down because of the weather issues. It hasn't grown in terms of planted area, so it's pretty much a sideways trend for Argentina. They have available land for expansion, but they haven't been able to expand given the farmers' situation in Argentina. Here we have the tax exports in Argentina. So they had a government, the Cristina Kirchner government in Argentina, which had 35% export tax. Have you thought about having a 35% export tax on your soybeans and corn? That was for the soybeans, so that's pretty heavy. That's very heavy to carry, and it hurts farmers' profitability. I mean, right away. Then we had the Macri government. They reduced the export tax to 25% in Argentina, and now we have the Alberto government that has increased again the export tax to 30% in Argentina. So that's a lot of tax for farmers in Argentina, and of course, which hurts their competitiveness in the market, and of course, it hurts their ability to grow and to expand in the last years and probably in the coming years. Okay. So moving forward here, talking a little bit about corn in Brazil. So when we think about planted area of corn in Brazil, we need to think about two different systems we have for planting corn in Brazil. We have corn as a summer crop, which competes with soybeans for planted area. And we have the corn as a second crop, as we saw before. So crop as first crop, the summer crop in Brazil for corn, it has decreased over the years, and the second crop has increased a lot. So in the last 10 years, we had grown from 31 million acres to 47 million acres of corn in Brazil. Yields have gone up also from 40 bushel per acre on average to 86 bushel per acre and on average. So in general terms, we have a very low national average for corn production in Brazil, but we have very, very different realities. We also have very high yields of corn in Brazil in some specific regions. But when we do the national average, it also takes into account a lot of corn that is produced at a subsistence level. It's not a commercial crop, so that hurts the national average when we think about yields in Brazil. So we have very good corn crop farmers in Brazil with yields as high as North American yields. So it's very different for corn than for soybeans. And here is a general view about the crop calendar for the second crop in Brazil. So I know you might have a question of, if you understand a little bit about the second crop in Brazil, how much of the crop is planted under risk in Brazil at this season, because we had a late planting season for the corn crop in Brazil. So if we think on average, usually 20% of the second crop in Brazil, it's planted on a high risk window. So it's planted too late. So it has the probability of not having any rain at all at pollinating period, okay, at pollinating time. So that's on average, okay, and usually 25% it's planted on the window which we call medium risk, okay. So usually on average 65% of the crop season corn second crop is planted on a perfect window. So that crop has almost no risk in terms of weather. So it will rain enough for pollinating, and probably the crop will perform very close to potential yields. At this year, what we have is 35% of the crop planted on a high risk window. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge difference compared to average, the 5-year average. And we still have another 25% planted on a medium risk window. So that left us with 35 plus 25, 40% of the corn second crop planted at a perfect window in Brazil. So we still have a lot during April and May to watch in terms of the crop season in Brazil. But the main point is we need rains on April, we need rains on May, and we might need some rains on June to have a perfect second crop. Rains on June are very, very rare, okay? And rains on May sometimes does not happen too. So we have a lot of risk when we think about the second crop in Brazil this year, okay? So we need to watch the weather for the next 2 months, 2 to 3 months in Brazil, okay? So here is a division between the corn as a second crop. So we had like 26 million acres of corn second crop 6 years ago. Now we have 35 million acres. So this is the crop that is planted after the soybeans at the same crop season. And we have 13 million acres of corn as summer crop, as first crop, which is the crop that compete with the soybean for the acreage. Okay, so it's very stable in the last years. It has decreased a lot already. It used to be the main crop in Brazil like 15, 20 years ago. It's not the main crop anymore. So the main crop is the second crop, not the summer crop. So here is a division in terms of production numbers. So in Brazil, we had like 40 million metric tons of corn as a second crop 6 years ago. Now we have 78. And this 78 number is the number that will change accordingly to weather in the coming months. So that's the number that it is at risk in the coming months of March, April, and May, given the rain in Brazil. Okay, and the summer crop it's almost done, 25 million metric tons. So I don't think too much change on these 25 million metric tons. That adds up to 103 million metric tons. 6 years ago, we were producing 66 million metric tons. So here is the yield difference between first crop and second crop. You see second crop outperforming summer crop in national average. And as I said before, the summer crop has a lot of different yield numbers among regions because of the producer profile, okay, using technology, not using technology, subsistence levels, and so on, okay? So this is our historical numbers in terms of production. So we are expecting 103 million metric tons of corn in Brazil in 2021. Of course, with a lot of risk on this number. I would say there is a downward trend on these 103 million metric tons. 10 years ago, we were producing 56 million metric tons. We were exporting 9 million metric tons 10 years ago, and now we are exporting 35 million metric tons. And if we look forward, and if we consider the current level of corn imports from China, I would say that we will be very close to 50 million metric tons in the next 5 years. Okay, so it will be massive if China keeps buying corn at the pace that they are buying lately. Okay, in the last months. And here's another figure which I think it's very interesting. We always thought about United States being the dominant player on corn market. Okay, and of course still it is. Okay, it's huge production, huge exports. Prices are referenced at the CBOT, so they are very important. But if we add Brazil and Argentina numbers, export numbers, those numbers are already higher than the United States numbers. So the South America corn crop, it's getting more and more important in a similar pattern that we saw with the soybeans years ago. So Brazilian soybean crop and Argentinian crop, it's extremely important to the market. And we see now that the corn crop in Brazil and Argentina, it's also extremely important for the international market. So Brazil and Argentina together, they export above 70 million metric tons of corn. United States in 2020-21, around 69. They still have to perform those numbers, but I don't think will be much different. So we have Ukraine with roughly 24, 25, 30, depending on the weather, on the year. And we have other countries with 22 million metric tons. Okay, so Brazil and Argentina are getting more and more important. Okay. If we think about the corn crop in Argentina, so planted area came from 8 million acres to 16 million acres. Okay, they will plant another 16 million acres this year. And this huge increase between 2015 and 2020, it was because from one government to another government, they just reduced export taxes in the corn from 22% to 10%. So that changed the whole battle for acreage dynamic between soybeans and corn in Argentina. Okay, so that's why they had this increase in corn planted area in the last 5 years. Okay, and when we think about yields, corn yields in Argentina have also improved over the years from 88 bushels per acre to 115 bushels per acre. The same problem that they have with the soybean crop this year has also affected the corn crop. So that's why they are having a lower yield than last year in terms of yield performance. Okay, so just looking a little bit back on history, the crop size, the corn crop size in Argentina came from 25 million metric tons to 45 million metric tons. We had that huge increase in planted area that took the corn crop in Argentina from a 30 million metric tons level to 45, 50 million metric tons level in just a few years. Okay, so that's a lot of corn coming to the market within a short period of time. Okay, and they have exported almost all of that corn. Okay, so consumption in Argentina, it's not that big, and they export very close to 40 million metric tons of corn. Okay, so we saw here some numbers, historical growth, and the performance of the Brazilian crop this year and in the past years. And I would like to bring some extra information about how we see Brazil compared to other players, and what are the main changes or the main structural changes in Brazil that have benefited farmers and have benefited corn and soybean production in Brazil in general. So I will go through some of these changes. One of them, which has been a benefit, but it could move other way very quickly. It's our exchange rate. Okay, so we have the yellow line, which is the soybean price in our currency. Our currency is the real, Brazilian real. Okay, so that's the soybean price on yellow since 2010. Okay, if we think about 2019, like 1.5, 2 years ago, we were talking about 80 reais per bag price reference, and now in just within a year and a half, we are talking about 160. So prices in Brazil have doubled in 1 year and a half. So and why does that has happened? One of the reasons you guys know very well, CBOT prices went up a lot. Okay, but the other reason is that our exchange rate it's losing power. So we are depreciating our exchange rate against the dollar, against the US dollar. So most of the countries are appreciating the exchange rate against the dollar because of the interest rates, because of the economy, because of the 1.9 trillion package to support the economy in the United States, which gives to the market a lot of money inflow. But in Brazil, we are still depreciating our exchange rate, and that benefit the farmers, that benefit our export sector. Okay, so our product becomes very cheap, and in local currency, our product has a very high increase in prices. So this gives us competitiveness. Okay, not only for soybeans and corn, but for any product that is exported. So that gives us a lot of competitiveness. Okay, so the exchange rate in Brazil, it's the blue line. So we have come from around 4 reais per bag on the left axis to something around 5.50 reais per US dollar. Okay, so I think I saw someone at the beginning of the presentation from Great Lakes saying that the Canadian dollar was appreciated around 10%. I think it was that. Maybe someone can help me later to better understand. So, in the Brazilian case, our currency in the last year has depreciated 20%, roughly 20%. Okay, and that gives a lot of competitiveness to our export market. Soybeans and corn benefit a lot from it. The other structural change we have in Brazil, it's about logistics. So we all saw massive numbers in terms of growth of soybeans and corn in Brazil. So we have a lot of logistic problems in Brazil that we still need to address. But at the same time, I always like to think maybe any country that faced the growth we faced in soybeans and corn production added would have some logistic problems. Okay, so it's too much growth to handle with infrastructure projects, which usually takes 2, 3, 5 years to maturity. So you are always lagging behind. Okay, your production comes ahead of the infrastructure. And but we have improved a lot. Okay, the main message is we still have problems, but we have massive improvements in terms of soybeans and corn exports. Okay, so here, well, Brazil, it's huge. You guys saw that we produce soybeans and corn in almost every place of the country, every spot of the country. So we have ports in the southern region of the country. We have ports in what we call the central region of the country. And we have a lot of new investments on this northern region of the country. So when we look back 10 years ago, we were exporting 40 million metric tons of soybeans and corn, of which 18 million metric tons were done by the southern ports. Okay, so that was 44% of the market done in the southern region of Brazil, and another 41% done on the central region of Brazil in terms of exports. So we moved from 40 million metric tons to 118 million metric tons in 2020, if we add soybeans and corn, and 36 million metric tons done by the south, what we call the South Corridor, the South Logistic Channel, 41 million metric tons done by the Central Channel, okay, and 41 million metric tons done by the Northern Channel. So in 2021, the Northern Corridor, the ports on the northern part of Brazil will be the most important ports for export of soybeans and corn, okay? So capacity on the northern region has grown from 6 million metric tons to 41 million metric tons, and they still have idle capacity at this northern region, given the recent projects that were built. So that's a massive change, because if we didn't have improved our logistic to the northern part of Brazil, probably the soybeans would have to travel a lot more to come to the central part and to the southern ports of Brazil. So we improved our logistics, but we still have problems to address. But the improvements were massive in terms of logistics. So we did not stop in terms of logistic investments in Brazil. Well, here is a little messy map, but what I want to show you guys is what improvements we've made. Okay, so we are using more the waterways. Okay, so the main waterways are in the Amazon region. Okay, so we have the Tapajós, the Solimões rivers, and we have improved a lot the volumes that go through these waterways. Okay, so the crop from Mato Grosso has to travel by truck to reach a waterway station terminal, and from the waterway they go to export port to load a Panamax. Okay, and we also have improved our railway system. Okay, we have. The railway system has not increased its share in total volume over the years, but our growth it was so huge that the railway system kept the share of volume over the years, which means that they have improved a lot already. Okay, so we have like the number 2 railway, which is the north-south, the Rumo railway that comes from Mato Grosso to Santos port. We have railways that come from central Brazil to the northern region. And the other ones usually come from the Midwest of Brazil to the central and southern ports. Okay, so capacity over these railways have improved a lot in the last years. And we have some new railway projects in Brazil too. So I don't think we will see any of these projects coming into operation in the next 3 to 4 years, but certainly in the next 10 years. We have a big project from the Mato Grosso to the waterway terminals in the Amazon region. This is a huge project, one of the biggest ones. We have some extensions from railways that already exist, and we have some railway projects that connect the center of Brazil either to the east ports or to the southern ports of Brazil. Okay, so we are improving our railway system in Brazil. So as any infrastructure project, it takes longer in Brazil than other countries, but it might come into operation one day or another. Okay. When we put all this together, the exchange rate, when we add the increased capacity of logistics in Brazil and also the decrease of the logistic cost in Brazil, and we think about how much soybeans and corn cost at a port level, we see massive improvements in competitiveness in Brazil. Okay, so we did some math here. So how much does it cost to produce soybeans and to take the soybeans to an exporting port in Brazil, United States, and Argentina? And the main message is that 10 years ago, Brazil used to have the more expensive soybeans. So for a farmer in Brazil, it costed in 2010, $10 per bushel to produce the soybeans and to put that soybeans at the export market, okay, at the export port. So that left very little room for profit margins back then. Okay, so prices would need to be above $10 per bushel to have any profit at the farm level. Okay, and if we think about the United States, it was the cheapest soybeans on the market. Okay, $9.2 per bushel. What we saw in the last years, given the changes on the exchange rate in Brazil, and given the changes on the infrastructure in Brazil, which is massive too, we saw that cost coming from 10.3 to something around 6.6. Yes, that's it. For a farmer at the Mato Grosso state to produce soybeans and to deliver that soybeans to the port, it cost him $6.6 per bushel. Then you think, okay, but prices now are around $13 per bushel. Okay, that's the margin. That's the margin that the farmer in Brazil has nowadays. Okay, it's huge. It's massive. Okay, if we think about the same math on the United States, it didn't change that much. Okay, and it makes sense because if we think about 2, 3, 4 years ago, I do not know about the situation on the Canadian farmer, but if we think about the North American farmer, they were struggling to have a profit on soybeans and corn. Okay, the situation changed last year, but if we think in the past 5 years, it was not, easy to make a profit out of soybeans and corn. Okay, and farmers had a lot of support from the government in the last years too. So our soybeans, it's very cheap. It's very, very cheap nowadays because of the currency and because also of the logistics improvements. On the right side, we have just the logistic number. Okay, so our logistic used to cost $2.7 per bushel, and now it costs $1.2 per bushel. Meanwhile, the logistic in the United States has increased in terms of costs over the same period. Okay. If we do the same math for corn, if we think about corn production in Brazil, there is another important question here. I did this math with considering 55% land rent in United States on average. In Argentina, our educated guess is around 60%. Okay, for United States, I used Iowa as a reference. And in Brazil, our educated guess is that roughly 30% of the planted soybean in Mato Grosso state is done on rented land. The other portion of it, it's own land, it's proprietary land. Okay. So farmers do not pay rent on it. If we do this math for corn in Brazil, so corn used to be very, very expensive. 10 years ago, we had government support for export our corn. So we had export programs supported by government to go into the market because our corn was just too expensive, very, very expensive. And if we think nowadays, the cost of our second corn crop, it's around $2.7 per bushel. Okay, in Argentina, we estimate the cost at $2.9 per bushel. And in the United States, we estimate at $4.6 per bushel. Of course, these are all very approximate calculations here. And the message I want to give you guys, it's the trend. Okay, so we used to be the more expensive place for producing soybeans and corn, and we are now the cheapest place. And what does that mean in the end of the day? It means different profit margins, and it means that before a Brazilian farmer goes out of the market, you might have some North American farmers and Argentina farmers going out of the market. So that's a big challenge. Okay, so that changes the dynamic when we think about these countries in the coming years and in the future, and who will perform better in the future. Okay. So here's another figure just to show how the exchange rate and especially the logistic, the infrastructure has influenced prices in Brazil. So we have historical prices. On the gray line, we have CBOT. On the blue line, we have Iowa prices, a little below CBOT, usually depending on the month of the year because of the basis. And we have Sorriso, which is the main producing county in Mato Grosso state. We have Sorriso prices, and used to be a large basis against CBOT prices. And what we saw last year, it was an improvement on infrastructure, but also, of course, we had a domestic issue here, which was there was completely lack of soybeans and corn in the market. So prices in the domestic market in Brazil went above CBOT prices for some months of the year. Okay, so what we might have in the future is we won't have prices above CBOT unless we have lack of soybeans on our domestic market. But this difference between Sorriso and CBOT, it might narrow a lot because of the infrastructure improvements. Okay. The other thing which is very interesting is that farmers in Brazil, and I think it's not only in Brazil, they did not sell well the crop. Okay, so the orange line here is the price of soybeans for a farmer in the Mato Grosso state. The blue bar is the percentage that he has sold of his crop. So we had like 50% of the crop sold with relatively low prices at this 2021 season, okay? And prices went up and up and up because of this CBOT increase, but also because of our exchange rate. And farmers didn't have as much soybeans to sell anymore. So average prices for farmers in Brazil nowadays are 100 to 102 in our price reference, and current prices are 157. So there is a 50% difference between average selling and current prices. So that hurts a lot for most of farmers. And that's why some farmers in Brazil, they were trying not to perform the contracts. I mean, when I say some farmers, I'm saying about exceptions, really exceptions. Most of the farmers, they performed the contracts, but some of them, they were really upset with this market movement, this 50% difference. If we think about dollars, the difference, it's not that big. Here's the same chart in dollars terms. So the difference, it's not as big as in Brazilian terms because of the exchange rate depreciation that we have, okay? I'm finishing here. I know I'm a little late, but I think I have two more slides. These are the profit margins in Brazil, okay? So on the left side, we have our profit margin in our exchange, our currency, okay? So it was a very decent profit margin, around 20 to 30%. And then on 1920 went up a lot. And in 2021, it was massive, massive, even considering that the farmer did not sell the crop well, okay? So this is the profit margin in our currency. And this is the profit margin on the chart on the right on US dollars per acre. Okay, so it was already a pretty decent profit margin in the last 10 years. So farmers were expanding with $100 to $150 per acre profit margin. And now farmers, they are just, have doubled the margin, and it's very impressive. And it's a frenzy in Brazil. I mean, everyone is looking for land. Everyone is buying new machinery. Prices of everything has gone skyrocket. Fertilizer, chemical, machinery, land. And I know that most of you farmers already know the cycles. So how it begins and usually how it ends. Okay. So this is the corn price. So corn price in Mato Grosso state is the red line. The blue line is corn price in Iowa, and the gray line is the corn price in CBOT. So we see how corn prices has come closer to CBOT, even above CBOT. The main reason is the lack of corn in the domestic market, because we exported almost all our soybeans and corn last year. And the domestic market was short in terms of corn and soybeans, and they started to pay above CBOT prices. But we have an infrastructure change here, which will bring the red line closer to the gray line, which means profit in the end of the day at the farmer pocket. Okay. So if we add soybeans and corn together, sorry, this is the corn margin. So corn, it was differently from soybeans. We had some bad years here for corn as a second crop in Mato Grosso state. So it's not all about profits. We had some bad years in terms of profit margins, but when we think about the last 2 years compared to historical levels, it's just massive profit margins for corn. If we add together a farmer in Mato Grosso that plants soybeans, harvest the soybeans, and then he plants corn as a second crop, profit margins are roughly close to $360 per acre in the 2021 season, 260 in the 1920 season. Of course, we still have to harvest the corn crops, so this 363 might change a little bit for the season. And then finally, I think it's my last slide. This is a profit calculation over price land in Brazil. So I used pasture price because growth in Brazil, it happens nowadays over pasture land. Okay, so 20 years ago, you had like an 18% profit over pasture land prices. If we think about the soybean business and the corn business, it used to be like 18%. So you needed back then like 5 years to pay the land you bought with 18% margin. And back then, the area increased 12% per year. Okay. So the message here is that land prices are going up. So if we think about the last 5 years, you need like 10 years to pay the pasture, to pay the land you bought it. So it's a 10% profit over the land price. And our ability to grow has come down to 4%. So as much profit you have over land, of course, you are incentivized to expand more. As your profit goes down, you are incentivized to grow less. So we have record levels of profits at very, very record levels. We never had a good year in terms of profits for a farmer as 2020, 2021. And even with such good profits, we can't grow much more than 4, 5, 6% per year. So that shows us that we have a lot to expand, but we will not expand at the same rates we did in the past. So it's not feasible anymore. So that's some thoughts on the future and how the soybean demand will be supported in the coming years. Okay. So I think from my side, that's what I had to show. And I would like to say sorry because I kind of took a little longer than we were expecting. So I'm hoping for the questions.
Perfect. So thanks for a great presentation, Marcos. I'm sure we all learned a lot. And I know we have some great presentations or questions for you, sorry. Just before we start, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Dewsbury, and I'm the Essex County Grain Originator, and I'll be taking us through the questions today. Are you ready, Marcos?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. Okay, so first question. One of our farmers was in Brazil 15 years ago, and they commented that there were large farms but not large equipment. Now it seems that there's a tremendous investment in larger equipment. What facility provides the financing?
Well, there is, of course, there is a big change. All the farmers have large equipments now. And usually the main financing is what we call the industry banks. So John Deere has its own bank in Brazil. AGCO has its own bank in Brazil. So New Holland and Case IH, they have their own bank in Brazil. So they are the main financing, okay? And there is lots of talk about how farmers in Brazil are financed. And what I have to say is that agriculture in Brazil, it's a hot spot in the economy. So everyone is trying to flow money into agriculture. So there is no lack of financing at all, okay? And I like to say that there is never lack of financing. It's just a matter of the interest rate, okay? It all depends on the interest rate that you want to pay. So it used to be a bigger problem in the past. I don't think it's a problem anymore, okay? So because agriculture in Brazil, it's a hot spot in the economy, everyone wants to take part of it. So it has a lot of money flowing.
Okay, perfect. That answered that great. The next question is who owns the land, or is it the big corporations? And what would be the acre value to purchase?
Well, the first one, it's easier. Okay, so we have in Brazil, usually small farmers, they plant on land, okay? But rented land has increased in Brazil, in every region, okay? So we have regions in Brazil, I think over 40 to 50% of the planted area, it's over rented land. When we think about the big corporations, they usually have a mix of proprietary land, of own land, and rented land. It varies a lot from company to company, but I would say that around 70, 30, 60, 40 of own land and rented land. It's the general number. Okay, we have corporations in Brazil with 100% rented land, and that's the general number. Regarding the prices, sorry, I don't have the price now in my mind. It differs a lot from region to region. I can give you guys later maybe.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, how do they move the grains? Is it by train, trucks, and what ports do they use to export the grains? I think you might have gone over a little bit of this, but if you can kind of touch on it again.
Well, that's very interesting because when we think about the United States, we have two main ports, two main regions. And in Brazil now we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, around 10 ports. So distributed along our coastline. So and how the crop is moved. Okay, so we have ports that receive cargo only by truck. We have ports that have the railway. Okay, so usually there is a short trip of truck and then goes to the railway and comes to the port. And we also have the hydroway, the barges. So it's usually done half by truck and then goes into the barge, and from the barge to the export port. So we have a good mixture, a good blend of these obvious channels. Okay, so it's I would need some numbers here to be more precise on the answer.
Well, that's perfect. I think that was a good general answer. Cool. Okay, next question. It says, how many acres of beans are non-GMO versus Roundup Ready versus IP? So could you do like a comparison maybe by percentage?
Well, I would say that non-GMO, it's a very small percentage. I would guess 2 to 3%, no more than that. Okay, it's a very niche market, and very, very niche market. And most of it's Roundup and BT varieties.
Okay, perfect. We're curious about livestock value in Brazil relative to cash crop, and how that could compare to Ontario. So so the livestock value compared to relative to cash crop.
Well, livestock value in Brazil has skyrocketed. So in the last 12 months, I mean, prices that a cattle farmer would never thought in their life, never, ever. And the main reason is that, first of all, agriculture expansion in Brazil, it goes mainly into pasture land. So you reduce the pasture land availability.
Okay.
To plant soybeans and corn. So with less pasture, you produce less cattle, and prices went up, and that's the current situation. So I did a quick math. I don't know if it helps. I don't know how you guys compare those numbers, but to have a head of livestock in Brazil now is comparable to plant an hectare of soybeans in terms of costs. Okay, it's very similar.
Oh, perfect.
If you buy the cattle, you grow the cattle, and it's very similar. It's very close. It used to be that way in the past. It used to be cheaper to have the livestock.
Well, perfect. I think that helps us out. The next question is, can a Brazilian farmer borrow money from banks to purchase land? And if yes, at what rate, if you know?
Well, that's something that does not happen frequently, okay, because usually the banks that do that, they do it in dollar terms. And so it's not frequent. We know that some business that farmers get money to buy land, and to be honest, if that was frequent in Brazil, we would have like the whole country planted. It would be irrational. So it's not common. Okay, it's not common, and but that's something that banks try to develop. Okay, so it's a discussion around collaterals, how you get paid back if something goes wrong, how you put your hands on the land in Brazil, which is it's a lot tricky on our legislation. So it doesn't give the banks the security they need for a long-term loan for land purchases.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, why are there no big farmers in the south end of the country? You might have touched on that before, but if you can kind of just give us another kind of answer.
Well, I think I could count in my hand fibers of 5,000 acres in the south of Brazil. Okay, so very, very small amount of farmers. Most of it are smaller farmers. Okay, so in the south of Brazil, it's usually where everything began. So a family had 5 kids, so they split the farm, and then the 5 kids split again for more 3 kids, and then the farms became very small, and they started to realize that they needed to migrate, so they migrated to the center of Brazil for larger pieces of land. So that's the general idea.
Perfect. Okay, so next question is, what is the soil organic matter in different regions? If you can kind of touch on that, or as much as you know about that.
Well, I will not have an answer for that.
Okay.
But our soil, it's not even close to Argentinian or North American soil. Okay, we fertilize a lot, so we need to fertilize. We need phosphorus. We need to correct the organic matter, and to correct the soil. And organic matter, it's something that the farmer is always trying to improve, because we have a very dry winter, so it becomes critical for yield production, for yield sustainability. So, but I don't have the numbers. Okay, I cannot say you the numbers.
Nope, that's okay. You gave us a good general answer. Okay, so next one is irrigation a common practice in Brazil?
Well, yes, it's common. Okay, so gladly my family farms. Okay, my dad he's a farmer. He plants soybeans and corn. He does irrigation in Brazil. We have specific regions in Brazil that have a lot of irrigation, very, very high yields. And if you want to buy a new pivot, do you call it pivot? I think yes, but if you want to buy a new pivot in Brazil, there is a 1-year waiting line. Okay, so everyone is investing in irrigation. The trick is, do we have enough water? And there is the energy trick too. So there is lots of regions in Brazil that have water available for irrigation, but do not have the energy, do not have the transmission of the energy. So that's something that I think it will increase a lot in Brazil, the irrigation. Okay, so we have a lot of irrigation in the Bahia state and Minas Gerais state and Goiás state.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. That was a great information to know. The next question is, what is the average percentage of crop loss due to going out of condition or not being able to harvest?
Well, that's a tricky one. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one because let's take this year as an example.
Okay.
We know of some farmers that couldn't even enter the field for harvesting. Okay, so lost is 100%. Okay. When we think about averages, state averages, national averages, those numbers are very small, very, very small, because at least if you harvest, then you are able to blend with good soybeans, okay? And you will, somewhere in the year, sometime in the year, you're gonna sell that soybeans with a discount or whatever, okay? So the crop number doesn't change that much. Okay, so, but the problems on the micro level, they really exist, okay? And those are the guys that go to the mills and they say, hey, I had a huge problem, I lost everything, so I cannot pay my bills. But those are problems at the farm level when we think about the crop size in general.
Perfect. Just to kind of touch back on the irrigation point, do you think with irrigation can like 100 bushels per acre for soybeans be reached in the region?
Yes, they already do. Okay, 90, I would say that 90, 85, 80 bushels per acre on soybeans, it's very common on irrigated areas. Okay, that already happens. Okay, and
Perfect.
And we have a contest in Brazil. It's called CESB, CESB.
Okay.
Where farmers they compete with each other for the higher yields. Okay, so that's something. It's online. There is a website. You guys can check those numbers. Of course, they harvest small portions of area for the contest. Okay, with very, very high yields, 100 bushel, 110, 120. And,
oh, wow.
But that gave us a very good idea about the potential, okay, about the potential. And as I said on the presentation, yield potential in Brazil, it's massive. If we only looking of the differences between the high performers farmers and the average farmer, there is a huge gap to catch up. Huge gap to catch up.
Okay, well, I think we all wish we could see 100 bushel beans, but previously you said that China pretty much cleaned up their inventory, and someone said they also heard that Brazil had to buy US beans because they actually oversold to China. Is there any truth in that?
Yes, there is. What we have in Brazil is that farmers sell in advance for the export market. Local industry, they buy hand to mouth. So when the local industry comes to the market, sometimes there is no soybeans anymore. Okay, that soybeans already has a stamp, which is China, going to China, the stamp. And that's why we had the lack of soybeans last year on the domestic market. Honestly, I think we will have a similar situation this year. Okay, maybe not as severe as last year, but similar situation. So, and that's also very related to the exchange rate. So as our exchange rate depreciate very fast, the export market it's more able to price faster that soybeans with and take advantage of the exchange rate. So and the local market, the local crushers, they are usually a little bit behind in terms of pricing this. It's about timing and cash flow and capacity to buy and hold.
Perfect. Another question we had was, do the Brazilian farmers have access to a crop insurance? and a price insurance program?
Yes, they do. It is a subsidized crop insurance the government has supported. So more and more farmers are able to buy that crop insurance. So it has increased the percentage of farmers that have crop insurance, but it is still very low when we think about the total market. So I would say most of the farmers, they are taking the risk of the weather and profits, most of it. So.
Perfect. How much more production growth is possible in Brazil for corn and beans? Like if you could kind of give us an estimate.
Well, we do a lot of studies here and forecast on these numbers. We did a satellite work trying to understand what is the pasture available in Brazil. So that there is lots of pasture in Brazil, but not all that pasture is, I would say, prime land for agriculture. So, but I would say that we still can grow a lot, 40, 50% easily in terms of area. The thing is that area is becoming more and more expensive. So if we think about the profit margins farmers have nowadays, and with that profit margins, are they growing only 4%? Maybe they could grow 6%. I mean, that's not much. I mean, how higher would prices have to go if we needed to grow 10% to supply the market? And I think that's the interesting discussion when we look forward.
Yeah. Okay. Great answer. Thanks so much for that. The next question is, okay, so we kind of have more of a statement. So one of our producers has said, it was my understanding that Paraguay is the 4th largest soy producer and most of the production is done by large farmers from Brazil. How are the soybeans exported? Are they through Paraguay or through Brazilian ports? And are there any government supports or trade agreements between the two countries?
Well, Paraguay, a lot of the soybeans in Paraguay is done by Brazilian farmers. So they cross the border, they expanded into Paraguay. Not sure if they are large farmers. Okay, so as I said before, that's very relative. Large compared to what? Okay, in Brazilian terms, they are not large farmers. Okay, and when we think about the exporting channel from Paraguay, it's the Paraguay River. So it goes south. It goes mostly to Argentina for the crushing industry in Argentina. Paraguay cannot export to China because Paraguay supports Hong Kong. So by geopolitical reasons, Paraguay cannot export to China. So in the past, the soybean from Paraguay used to come to Brazil for exporting through our ports. So it's not anymore. So it's all through the Paraguay River going south to the Argentina.
Oh, perfect. That was a great answer. The next question we have is, what actions are Brazilian farmers taking to protect their soils from overuse and decline? So I know you mentioned use a lot of fertilizer, but can you touch on that again?
There is we are almost a no-till country. Okay, so some cotton farmers still do tillage, but most of the farmers do not do tillage anymore. So it's a no-till farm. We see a lot of these high-performing farmers. They usually plant pasture as a cover crop, so to improve soil capacity. So I would say that farmers have been dealing very well with this soil maintenance and sustainability issue. So.
Perfect. I think you touched on this as well, but what's the spread on input costs? So like seed, fertilizer, chemicals, like I know we're seeing pretty high costs right now, but kind of compared to South America. And are you guys still run soybean seed? So I know you said it was prices are high, but can you touch on that again?
Well, for the crop that is being harvested in Brazil, input costs were low compared to prices. So farmers didn't buy high input costs with high prices. And I would say that for the next crop, there is a high percentage of the inputs, fertilizers, chemicals, and seeds that were bought before the price spike, the price increase. Okay, so if we go to the market now, fertilizer prices has skyrocketed, as well as seed prices, and not as much with the chemicals. I mean, there's more competition on chemical companies, so they cannot increase that much. So we have a large increase in costs, but we have also a very high percentage of the farmers that bought before the price increase, because they just had a full pocket of money, so they anticipated the input purchases.
Yeah. Well, perfect. It was good for them. Other thing is how do you see China's buying outcome in the Brazilian corn and soybean market, and do you see them as a big player?
Sorry, can you repeat, Rachel?
Yep. It says, how do you see China's buying outcome in the Brazilian corn and soybean market, and do you see them as a big player? So, like,
in terms of corn market?
Yep, corn.
Okay, in China, I think we have two movements. We had a lot of faith in the past in the ethanol program from corn in China. So we do not have that faith anymore. I think they have reduced their ethanol program based on corn. They're going electric in the future, so that's also a massive change. But at the same time, their prices, their local prices, have shown us that there is lack of corn in the domestic market. I mean, that's very clear. So when we look at the future, we see China importing something around 40 to 50 million metric tons on a 10-year time horizon. So that's how we see China, and we see Brazil exporting more to China. Brazil is not allowed to export corn to China, so it's not yet. So we're dealing with some basic stuff here on supplying China with corn, so we are not even allowed to export. So that's how I see it.
Perfect. Kind of a more simpler question. What are the most common row widths of planted soybeans?
Common what?
Like the row widths, so the spacing when you plant soybeans.
Oh, we use here 45 centimeters.
Okay.
45 centimeters from line to line, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's 45. In some regions, it's 60 centimeters. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the centimeters of it. So
we usually do inches, but I can convert that later.
Okay, sorry, I don't know.
No, that's okay. So you said 40 and 60. Okay, perfect. Do you see the current COVID issues in Brazil having a significant impact on the ag sector or the agriculture sector?
Well, the main problem are not for soybeans and corn. Okay, the main problem is for vegetables, fruits that depend a lot on labor, and those are the main sectors that suffer with the COVID. When we think about labor availability and safety of the workers. And when we think about the protein industry, there is also lots of workers that they are suffering a little bit with the COVID. So I think we are in the worst possible time for the COVID in Brazil. So I think we might be closer to the worst we could see in terms of impact from the COVID into the agribusiness. So, and we haven't seen that something that it's very impressive. Okay, so I think we're going to get better over the coming months. So
Yeah, I think
hope
we're all.
so. No one
I think
has
we're all
that
hoping
answer.
so. I think we're all hoping so too. Okay, so we have a couple more. How much domestic demand is there for livestock feed ethanol and biodiesel? I don't know if you can kind of touch on that.
Well, we have a mandate for biodiesel in Brazil. We blend our diesel with 12%. Now I think it's 13% biodiesel, which is a huge market in Brazil. So what we had in Brazil, it was the feed market growing more than the oil market, and they needed to find some demand. They needed to create some demand for the oil market, and they came up with the biodiesel mandate. And I think you guys already know that story from the United States and so on. So the oil for biodiesel use in Brazil, it's become more and more important. It will grow until 15% in the next years. So our blending of biodiesel into the diesel consumed in Brazil, it will go to 15% in the coming years. So it's a huge market. What was the other question?
Pardon me?
What was the first question? I think you had.
Yeah, it was. How much domestic demand is there for livestock feed ethanol and biodiesel? So anything, can you touch on ethanol?
Well, on ethanol, we have still a booming industry in Brazil, ethanol corn industry in the Mato Grosso state. It has increased a lot. I mean, it's nothing compared to the United States, but it has grown from nothing to around 8 million metric tons of consumption in the Mato Grosso state. But in my view, it has a lot of sustainability questions that need to be answered because it's far from the consumption regions of ethanol. So you have a lot of transportation costs for the ethanol market. Of course, you have the DDG to support the operation, which is very profitable nowadays. So that's that's what we have in the ethanol market in Brazil.
Perfect. Okay, so 3 more, and then we're gonna go to Don. So first one of the 3 is: do shipments to China primarily go through the Panama Canal or around Cape Horn?
Primarily Cape Horn. Almost nothing through the Panama Canal. It's too expensive for grains and corn. It's good to go for containers. Okay. Most of it.
Most of it, okay. And then we're just going to kind of touch briefly back on some of the dividing of the land. So we had a customer say, you briefly touched on succession planning. Is there a law in Brazil that assets or land holdings must be divided equally amongst children? I think kind of back to our conversation about the smaller farmers.
Well, if there is nothing written differently, usually it's equally divided among the kids, among children.
Okay.
But of course, you have different agreements and depending on what you do. So, but if that says nothing, it's equally divided. So that's how it works. How the law says to work. But it could be different if you want to.
It's in writing. Okay. So last question. We have a couple guys. Curious if there's any like social media or farm news or weather sites that you could share to keep everyone more up to date what's going on in Brazil. Was there anything? I know you had said that that competition between the growers for the best yields, but is there anything else that you could kind of suggest that we maybe keep an eye on?
Well, there is. If you guys want to see this yield contest, it's CESB, and it's in Portuguese. It's a yield contest. I think you need to quickly try to find it. I can maybe send you the link later.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And regarding the news, I think you guys have most of the news on I mean, Reuters, Bloomberg, DTN, most of the news that comes out from Brazil in local media are also the same news that goes to Reuters and DTN and so on. So regarding the weather, there's lots of sources. The question is always which one to believe and which one to make a bet on it.
Yes.
So, it's not different from what you guys have in the United States. Pretty much the same. I think pretty much the same. They use the same models: the GFS, the North American, the European model, and I don't think there is a company that does a much different work on the weather. If you guys know, please let me know. I would like to know them.
Okay, perfect. Well, you answered all our questions, so thanks for answering the hard ones and the easy ones. It was a great presentation. We're really lucky to have you today. So I'm going to pass this back to Don, and he's going to wrap up the meeting for us. Thanks, Marcos.
Thank
Great.
you, Rachel.
Great, thank you, Marcus. That was fabulous. That was a really good in-depth look at Brazil and South America, and you know, we've had our eyes on South America for a long time, and you really bring that to light. So I'll remind everybody this has been recorded so that you can kind of catch it again with anyone else in your farming operation. I want to remind everybody that, you know, all the capital that we've got going on, every dollar we spend is a farmer's dollar. So it's certainly, we're certainly a co-op, and we're certainly a company that's owned by the people that deal with us. But once again, I want to thank everybody. I wish we were doing these in person. Hopefully we all have get the vaccine and we can get moving on back to some normalcy at some point in time. That certainly will come. Once again, on behalf of Great Lakes Grain, thanks for everybody attending today, and have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.